You'd struggle to find a character in Marvel's library as revered as Matthew Murdock. Lawyer by day, vigilante by night, the man without fear has watched over Hell's Kitchen since the 1960s and has since become one of Marvel's most storied characters. Today, Daredevil is one of the most recognizable figures of the superhero genre, with appearances across a wide variety of mediums having cemented him as a true A-lister. But with the advent of new adaptations, as well as the character's resurgent popularity, misconceptions are bound to occur. Unfortunately, there are quite a few things about Matt Murdock that people just seem to misapprehend, so it's time to right those wrongs. I'm Ewan from What Culture, and here are 10 things everyone always gets wrong about Daredevil. Number 10. Daredevil has never killed. As far as Marvel's street-level heroes go, Matt Murdock is actually relatively tame. The Punisher kills every damn villain he encounters, and Moon Knight, despite originally starting out as a Batman analog of sorts, is almost just as bad. This leaves the burden of moral responsibility to Matt Murdock, a paragon of Catholic guilt who never, ever kills. Except he has, and he does. Although it's certainly true that Daredevil exercises a no-killing rule, several have perished via his influence either directly or indirectly. Back in 2010's Shadowland event, a story that saw Matt Murdock possessed by a ghostly spirit known as the Beast, Matt stabbed and killed Bullseye in the exact same way the villain had killed Elektra years prior. Yes, this wasn't technically Daredevil per se, but that's at least one blob of red in the character's ledger. But what about those times where Matt has been in control of his own faculties? Well, back in Kevin Smith and Joe Quesada's Guardian Devil, a storyline that saw a dying Mysterio attempt to ruin Matt's life, Matt pretty much just turns around and humiliates Mysterio into killing himself. Again, the villain was already dying, but the ethics are questionable at best. Apart from those instances, Murdock once threw Bullseye out of a window and broke the villain's neck, murdered Wilson Fisk in the climactic End of Days, and was even responsible for the creation of Typhoid Mary after accidentally throwing her through a window back in Miller's The Man Without Fear. Not a great record, it must be said. Number 9. Frank Miller's run is definitively the character's best. Misconceptions may abound when it comes to Daredevil, but one thing that there's no contesting is that the character has been the subject of more legendary story arcs than any other Marvel character, so much so that it would be impossible to proclaim any single one as being definitive. And yet, many still attempt to do so, with Miller's undoubtedly the most revered of the bunch. Everyone is entitled to their own favourite, of course, and though it is unquestionable that Miller contributed the bulk of what we've come to associate with The Man Without Fear, it is debatable as to whether or not the character peaked with his stint on the book. Bendis had an utterly superb time on Daredevil with Alex Maleev, followed up by an equally formidable, if not slightly overlooked run from Ed Brubaker and Michael Lark, and that's without even mentioning the more recent contributions of Mark Waid, Chris Samnee, and countless others. Point being, Daredevil isn't short of quality. Heralding any single run as the definitive best, however, isn't as easy a task as some would imply. Number 8. The black suit is better than the red one. Daredevil Season 3 was absolutely the best of Marvel's Netflix shows, but one thing that was slightly bizarre was the way many fans reacted to the return of the character's black costume. Sure, it made sense thematically, with Murdock disillusioned with his faith and the reason why he took up crime fighting in the first place, but was it actually better than the character's iconic red suit? No. The black costume first appeared in Frank Miller and John Romita Jr.'s The Man Without Fear, a storyline that rebooted Daredevil's origins and one that inspired elements of the show's first season. By the end, however, Matt suits up in the red costume proper, the character's second in the comics after the yellow suit, and becomes Daredevil the way we remember him. Their version of the red suit was perfect, but for some reason, people just seem to prefer the black outfit, which would pretty much be the same as proclaiming that Bruce Wayne's balaclava look from Batman animated series was the superior costume. Number 7. Spider-Man still has it worse. So, who has it worse? Well, the only way to find out is to list off the worst things that have happened to either character, so here goes. Since being created in 1962, Spider-Man has seen numerous relationships crumble, with the most notable being the death of Gwen Stacy. He battled a condition where he sprouted several new appendages, being the victim of a cloning plot that terrorized readers in the mid-90s, had his marriage destroyed by making a deal with Mephisto, and lastly, he had his mind swapped with Doc Ock and died in his disease-ridden body. Tough act to follow, right? Well, not if you're Matt Murdock. Since 1964, Daredevil has had his entire life ripped from underneath his feet by Wilson Fisk. He was targeted by Mephisto, who tried to mentally destabilize Murdoch by faking the rise of the Antichrist. He witnessed the death of two of his biggest loves, Elektra and Karen Page, had his identity exposed to the public by Fisk, which led to him being incarcerated alongside all the villains he helped put away, had his wife, Mia Donovan, driven mad by Mr. Fear's drugs, and was eventually even made a fugitive of the law when Fisk became mayor. Case closed, am I right? Number 6. He only uses a billy club. Matt Murdock's billy club may be one of Marvel's more iconic weapons, but it isn't the only tool the character has in his arsenal. Over the years, the man without fear has utilized guns, swords, bows, and even the environment itself against would-be aggressors. There's also the fact he's pretty handy with any weapon at hand too, making him one of the most formidable combatants in the Marvel Universe. In exciting developments, Murdock is even set to become the Guardian of the Bifrost Bridge, a title previously held by Heimdall. Number 5. The significance of Ben Urich. Ben Urich is to Daredevil what Commissioner Gordon is to Batman, an integral component of the character's mythos. Given his fate in the first season of Marvel's Daredevil, however, fans could probably be forgiven for thinking that isn't actually the case. Even though he was portrayed to perfection by Vondi Curtis Hall, the showrunners decided that Season 1 needed a death to cap things off, and so Urich was killed by Fisk in the penultimate episode. Say what you will about the subsequent seasons, but one thing there's no denying is that Urich's presence was sorely missed. In the comics, Ben is an investigative reporter for the Daily Bugle, and a good one at that. He sticks his nose where it doesn't belong, has a keen eye for a good story, and is determined to tell the truth, even if it places his own life in jeopardy. He plays a pivotal role in the Born Again saga, and an even greater one in End of Days, where he sets out to tell the story of what really happened to Daredevil, in a media landscape that couldn't really care less. He's an honourable man, and a figure who has often proved to be the unsung hero of the Man Without Fear stories, which is why it's such a shame he succumbed to such an unfortunate fate in the TV show. Number 4. Kingpin was Daredevil's first villain. Kingpin may be Daredevil's most famous adversary, but he wasn't always as synonymous with the character as you may think. Yes, while figures like Bullseye, Elektra, and Typhoid Mary are all Daredevil bad guys through and through, Wilson Fisk actually started out life as one of Spider-Man's. There, he took on the role of a stereotypical mob mastermind, a schemer whose plans were constantly foiled by the plucky young wallcrawler. It wasn't until Frank Miller took the reins on Daredevil where that relationship would change forever. Miller took the bold decision to make Fisk a paragon of corruption and violence, and changed his concerns from spider slayers to drug trafficking, racketeering, and assassination. When Daredevil began upsetting his plans, Fisk would turn his attention to Hell's Kitchen, and thus one of the most iconic rivalries in comics was born. Number 3. It was Matt Murdock who scolded Tony Stark in Civil War. It's a testament to Civil War's impact that we're still talking about it almost 13 years after it was originally published. Despite featuring big climactic battles between the likes of Iron Man and Captain America, a clone Thor ripping apart Goliath, and even the Fantastic Four splitting into two, one of the biggest fan-favourite sequences actually revolves around Daredevil, as the Man Without Fear is apprehended by Tony Stark's pro-registration forces. Stark confronts Daredevil, who then proceeds to gift a silver coin to his now enemy before referring to him as Judas. Given the religious reference, it would be fair to assume that Matt Murdock was responsible for chastising Stark, but it isn't, even if it was originally intended to be him. Number 2. He only ever lived in Hell's Kitchen. Beginning with Daredevil number 87, Volume 1, Jerry Conway and Gene Colan decided to send Matt to San Francisco with then-girlfriend Natasha Romanoff. The pair shared a place together and transplanted their crime-fighting operation from the East Coast to the West along the way, with Matt and Nat staying in the city for a dozen or so issues before their relationship fell apart and Matt came back to New York. There he remained for a good few decades until Mark Waid and Chris Samnee uprooted the character all over again and sent him back to San Fran in Daredevil number 1, Volume 4. Number 1, he's always been a Defender. For those less versed in the Marvel Universe, no, the Defenders weren't originally a street-level group. The character has only recently been associated with the team thanks to 2017's Defenders TV show, while the comics themselves only recently depicted that group that same year. So, what's the story with the actual Defenders? Well, the original group actually have a lot more in common with the Avengers, with the founding members being Doctor Strange, Hulk, and Namor. Turns out that Daredevil isn't really that much of a team player. He only briefly joined the New Avengers and tends to favor brief partnerships over long-running organizations. Though, given how it's worked out for the character over the years, it's probably safe to say that's a good thing.